Hello and welcome. I'm Todd Fernandez with Climate Crisis Policy and the Earth Bill Network, and I'll be your host today. Thank you all for being here as the Earth swelters. Nothing could be more urgent. And we have a full and great lineup today. We'll start with the Earth Bill update from Representative Espaillat's office. Francesco Arreaga is here. Then we'll have Jake Davis dig into the farm food supply chain to help us have a clear understanding of how big ag controls farming practices and how the Earth Bill reaches those corporations. Then Felice Stadler from Environmental Defense Fund will be here to update us on this Schumer Manchin saga. And then we'll go deep into the strategy behind a petition to the EPA to ban greenhouse gases via the Toxic Substances Control Act. There are a lot of moving pieces at the moment in Congress and in the movement. We'll stay on the call at the end of the call to discuss all of this more in depth and informally, to share our thoughts and feelings about it all. There's a lot to process. Briefly, Senator Schumer seems to have pulled the plug on the negotiations for $550 billion in climate investments. Some are standing down as he asked, others are not. Most excitedly, the congressional staff have written unprecedented letters to President Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi, and very courageous House staffers held a sit-in in Senator Schumer's office. Here's a picture of that. Go over to that. There they are. The bravery and desperation evident in this move cannot be overstated. You don't do this when you work in Congress. You don't go do a sit-in the Senate Majority Leader's office. So bravo to all of them. And regarding Schumer, our network and coalition partners in New York really turned up the heat. Turned up the action rather in July 2 with 3 big actions at Schumer's house. Let's see, there's that one, Schumer's house. And then at his office, there we are meeting with Patrick Donovan, his liaison there in the middle, sort of in the middle. And then the Peekskill team, where are they? There they are, Courtney Williams. Did a wonderful job, and there's a video of this meeting, and it's just heartwarming and passionate. So bravo to all of those folks who did that, particularly Samantha Elal and Courtney Williams, who led those 2 efforts, and I organized the New York one. The next big move is on Thursday at the Congressional Staff Baseball game in DC at 6 p.m., where there's an action happening. The details are not public, but you can sign up on that website. And please help spread the word. Our friends at Chesapeake Climate Action Network are leading on this with several others, and they have escalation plans for August 5th and September 30th, which is the final deadline for a reconciliation bill that could include climate action. Other coalitions are broadening their focus from Congress to the EPA and a host of rulemaking focuses. The Climate Action Campaign has a new pollution solution coalition, and groups who want to work on the EPA regulations are invited to join that. People v. Fossil Fuels, which was previously Break Free from Fossil Fuels, so it's now rebranded as People versus Fossil Fuels, is focusing on a climate emergency declaration by President Biden and is ratcheting up that push with an action on August 2nd. They're asking groups to take action locally, however you would like, and post your action on a joint site. I'll put some links in the chat in a minute. That push includes demands to create 100% renewable energy plans and zero emission transportation plans using various existing emergency powers, and calls for stopping exports and new leases and international funding for fossil fuel projects. Personally, I'm urging that we keep pushing the Senate and Congress to take action on climate while the Democrats still have the gavel. I don't think we should fold or stand down just because there's an impasse with 6 months left still in this Congress. And I personally can't understand taking the month off in August with so much to do. There are several topics to debrief on after this last 18 months. Top among them are how the demands get determined and whether that's based on politics or science and who decides that, and how independent or not the coalitions and groups and their strategy and action plans are from the political parties. We will never prevail if we give up or submit to the limits of politics as they stand now, with big oil and big ag oligarchies in control. And we will never prevail without a far stronger coordinated push on Congress, which should be continuous escalating and relentless, just like the heat and climate devastation. During the call, we'll have a poll on this and other priorities and talk more about it all again at the end. Of course, part of this means creating a legislative demand with real greenhouse gas policy solutions and deadlines big enough to inspire mass unity and public engagement that is independent from the current politics. And this is a huge task, but we're on it with the Earth Bill in motion. So today we're going to start with an update on the Earth Bill, the sponsorship process, and the latest on the bill finalizing and introduction plans. And for that, we welcome back Francesco Arreaga, policy advisor from Representative Espaillat's office, who you met at our last meeting. Let's see, where did my notes go? Welcome, Francesco. I'm very grateful for everything you and your office is doing. Obviously, you know, we're beyond eager to get this bill introduced so we can unleash all of our passion and get working on a solution we believe in. So welcome again, the floor is yours. We're excited to hear the latest news and plans. And thank you again for being here.
No, thank you, Todd. Really appreciate all of your support throughout this process. Thank you to everyone who joined this call. You all are on the front lines fighting for climate justice. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you for bringing the Earth Bill to our attention. As you may have seen, also New York State just is about to pass the Build Public Renewables Act. Senate majority is set to pass that. I believe it's already going through that process, and that bill at the state level would make it so that 70% of electricity comes from renewable energy by 2030 in the state of New York. So we're seeing states move on this. And of course, we also have the Supreme Court's latest decision on the EPA, gutting the EPA's authority to regulate coal power plants and their carbon emissions. And so right now is the moment for Congress to be acting. And the Earth Bill is one important way that we do that. The Earth Bill will provide for 100% renewable electricity, zero emission vehicles, and regenerative agriculture by 2030. And again, very appreciative of all the work Todd, the Earth Bill Network, climate crisis groups, everyone here on the call, thank you for all the work you're doing on this at the moment. We have an EDR colleague out in the system. And so what that means is that other members of the House are aware that we are finalizing the Earth Bill. We are going to be introducing the Earth Bill. And so we're gathering support internally to have what are called original co-sponsors. So those are members of the House who sign up to say that they support a bill the moment it's being introduced. And so far, we haven't gotten any other members of the House as original co-sponsors. So if you all can reach out to your local representatives in Congress, let them know that we are working on this bill and we are hoping to introduce it ASAP. That would be much appreciated. And on the internal piece to it, the bill is currently being finalized by what is called Legislative Counsel in the House. Actually, this week, yesterday, in fact, Todd, they got in touch with me asking to meet on, they had some questions apparently on the renewable energy provisions of the bill. To be frank with you all, I think the bill is very comprehensive and easy to do from a legislative perspective in drafting the bill. But there's a bureaucratic process within the House of finalizing legislation before it gets introduced. So we're going through those motions. I'm hoping that it will be done as soon as possible because we have been doing this for a long time now and we want to get it out there. But at the very least, it's in the EDR colleague system. Other members of the House are aware of it, and we want to get good support from other members. So anything y'all can do to bring support from other members of the House to this is much appreciated. Thank you all, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Francesco. Also, we have now 75 groups have signed on to the official form, Here's the official form if your organization has not filled out yet to support the bill. And the Dear Colleague letter, electronic Dear Colleague letter, has been sent out over multiple places for you all to have it. And I put the link to our website. If you ever lose anything, go to the action page on the earthbill.org website, and all the information you need there is there. Francesco, so I know we've been trying to get a timeline, but we still don't know, but you're hopeful we'll get a final bill this week maybe, or?
I'm pushing from the inside. We want it to be finalized ASAP. As you all may have seen, when it was Earth Day, Congressman Espaillat did a press release on the Earth bill, and now we have that Dear Colleague, but we need the final bill to introduce it. And so once it's out of Ledge Council, we will have that final version, and we will be introducing the moment. And the good thing is that right now this week we are in session, so members of Congress are here. But in the House, we have what are called pro forma sessions as well, which means that even if the House isn't in session, they will open the House for, say, 1 hour sometime during a week. And during that 1 hour, members can introduce legislation and file things. So we will be able to file this as soon as we have that final product from Ledge Council. And of course, we have the fall session coming up, and we will definitely be advocating for support over this and building the momentum so that more people in the country are aware of it and more members of Congress hopefully come on board.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And obviously, everyone, it'll be easier once we have the final bill. I'm sure if you're reaching out to your congressional contacts, they want to see final language before they decide what they're doing. So we're in a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, but as always, it feels like. So, but nevertheless, it's still important to go ahead and initiate that outreach, get their focus, because all busy people in offices, get them focused on it, and they can see the current draft, and they can contact Francesco if they have questions. And I know some of you have already done this, and questions have already made their way to Francesco from a couple offices. So I guess that's everything we have on this. I'm pressuring for Francesco. I feel guilty. Please accept my public apologies for stressing out on you, Francesco. You're the nicest person I've ever met, and it just kills me every time I'm freaking out and I write you a stressful email.
No need to apologize, Todd. Everything you're doing is very important for the planet and for our country and for future generations of people in our country. So, we're also putting pressure from our side, and we're also doing our best. And like I said, we're very grateful to you and to everyone on this call, because we can't do what we do here in Congress without people at the grassroots level, activists, and people who are pushing for climate justice on the ground. So thank you all for what you do.
Well, thank you. And everyone, it'll be much easier once we get the bill filed, but we need it now. It's been several months, and we've a little bit are not stalled, but we're definitely not full steam ahead like we would have been. And as the time dragged on, I myself have gotten a little bit, it's stopping my forward momentum. So, and that I feel like when I'm stuck in a stasis, it drives me crazy. I don't mind working hard and moving forward. Waiting to do that is the hard part. So you understand, I know, and everyone else here too. And thank you all for your patience. We're going to get through this. So I trust Francesco. If you need us to find ways to lobby the Legislative Council's office, I know they're a closed loop, but we're very creative. So if it turns out that we need to, find new ways to get to these folks, because it just doesn't seem right at this point. So, I'm always thinking to the next angle, but we're trying to be patient. So we'll see. The next week or two, it sounds like we're going to get there. And if not, then we can regroup on alternative plans.
We will get it done. We will get it done. It's important. We will get it done.
All right. Well, your assurance makes me feel better a little bit, and I'll feel a lot better when it actually happens.
I just got to say, we need more people like you, Todd, on all the issues in Congress, because that's the energy we need across the board: reproductive justice, economic justice, social justice. That's really that's the spirit we need to push legislators and to push progress in our country, because we're in a dire situation. So, you know, always appreciate everything y'all do.
All right, be careful what you say though. 'Cause more emails coming. But anyway, thank you so much. Anyone else have any questions for Francesco before we let him go?
Thomas has a question.
All right.
Yes, I have a question. Francesco, thank you for being with us today. Just a general question about the intelligence that you might be receiving, either from that hour when the House members gathered together, or in general, as to the acceptability of what we are proposing through your House member. What does it feel like? Are there any Republicans that are vaguely interested, for example? What percentage of the Democrats want to sign on? What are you hearing from your people? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. On the Republican side, I will say it's been very sad to see the lack of support for climate change legislation. As an appropriator, Congressman Espaillat has requested funding for our climate accounts at the international level, including the Green Climate Fund, to give you an example. And those accounts are always blocked by Republicans. Last year, the Green Climate Fund didn't receive a penny in money from the US government because it was blocked by Republicans. And so we see that at the domestic level as well. So anyone who is living in a district with a member of Congress from the other side of the aisle, civic engagement and making sure that your members of Congress are aware of your priorities and what you want to see done in Congress is very important. And from the Democratic side, I will say that we have gotten a couple of emails, which I've shared with Todd, about the Earth Bill through the Eat Your Colleague system. I'm hopeful that there will be broad support, especially from the New York delegation, because as I mentioned at the top, New York is moving forward with renewable energy standards at the state level. So one would hope that the New York delegation would be supportive. And of course, Congressman Espaillat is part of that delegation. So I'm hopeful that there will be support. But that's also where grassroots activists like yourselves come in, right? Making sure that you are communicating with your members of Congress, explaining to them why this matters to you, why it's important, why they shouldn't give up on the issue. And that's really what is necessary to move the needle forward.
Well, thank you again, Francesco. Everyone just know we're in the vanguard of the vanguard, and calling for mandates on polluters to stop polluting. This is not. It's in everybody's reports and everybody's recommendations, but it's not in anyone's legislation really. So we are at the vanguard of the vanguard, and we are going to be calling the hard question with everyone, including our friends and people you would think would normally be on board with this. These kinds of ideas were included in the OFF Act, but were not included in the Green New Deal resolution. So, we are at the vanguard of the vanguard, but it's the right answer and it's the end game. So we're picking the right fight, so to speak.
And to add to that, Todd, too, the Supreme Court has just said, Congress needs to act. That's what their holding was basically in the case on the EPA. It said Congress needs to move on this. The elected representatives need to move on it. And so if that is the position of the Supreme Court at the moment, there's no better time for Congress to say, these are the mandates we're going to be setting. This is the year we have to meet. And this is the renewable energy standards that we're setting for the whole country, and we must abide by it, and setting a marker down so that we can at least have a productive conversation and hopefully a vote on the floor and get this passed into law, get this signed into law by President Biden. That is the goal.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, again, thank you, Francesco, for everything. I'll be waiting with bated breath to get the answers, to get the next steps done. And we're all very grateful for your continued perseverance in all of this and your clear commitment to it all. So thanks again.
I think Mary had a question. I saw her raise her hand.
Go
So,
ahead, Mary.
You're talking about me. I'm sorry to be both late and ignorant of all of this, but here I am now. Francesco, a question about process. Who are you, and how does it work when I gather that this group has come up with a good bill, but we've got nobody sponsoring it. How does that work? Does this happen very often? That some outside group, if that's what we are, comes up with a bill and we just look for sponsors?
no, so I can explain to you a little bit about how it works. So Congressman Espaillat represents a district that is heavily impacted by climate change, and there are very high asthma levels, unfortunately, in the district, and that is connected with the environment. And so this is a priority for the congressman, and Todd came to us with the Earth bill. He brought it to our attention, and so we had discussions on it. We touched base several times and looked at legislative language and collaborated on crafting the bill. And then once you have the bill crafted, you end up sending it to House Legislative Counsel. And that is the office within the House that actually gives you the final product that you will submit to the House. It's supposed to look very similar to the drafts that you submit to them initially. And once you have the final product, you file it, and it's assigned an HR number. And now when we say we have it in the Eat Your Colleague system, that means that we've submitted a statement explaining what the bill does and telling other members of the House that the congressman will be filing this bill soon, and that we are hopeful that other members will join him as what are called original co-sponsors. Now, you don't need original co-sponsors to file a bill. You can file it on your own. Many bills are done like that. But it's always good to have one or two original co-sponsors just to show that other members are also interested. But of course, if you don't have that, once you file it, you can just have what are called co-sponsors. They're not original, but they're co-sponsors, people who come on board after it's been filed. And so that will be the next step. So that's a little bit of what we've been doing so far, and happy to keep you updated and keep everyone here updated on what the process continues to look like.
Wonderful, wonderful again. Well, thank you for that recap again, Francesco. And we do have to move on. We have a tight schedule today. Thank you again for everything. And you're welcome to hang out, but thank you for being here.
Thank you all for what you do. Really appreciate everything. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, wonderful. Next up, we have Jake Davis of Local Roots Strategy, who was also with Family Farm Action previously. He's a general expert on farm policy and has kindly offered to come help us better understand in real life terms how big ag controls farming practices and what I'm calling the farm food supply chain. I'm not even sure I have the right terminology for this. This is a big part of the Earth Bill, as you know, the mandate on industrial, plant, or animal corporations. So we derived all of that working with other folks at Family Farm Action a while ago. But I myself just deferred to the experts on this and never really fully understood or tried to understand, who these corporations are and how we've captured them. So I'm grateful to have Jake here to help us all understand better. And thank you, Jake. Please take it away, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And I'll try to start with a broad overview, and then I'm sure folks will have questions. So I want to start by just, explaining sort of the general structure that exists in our current food system. So there are really three buckets, let's call them, or three big buckets of characters involved in the the food supply chain, and then I'll explain those, and then I'll talk a little bit about how they interact. So you've got sort of what we would call, what folks in the industry would generally refer to as agribusinesses, generally corporate agribusinesses. Those agribusinesses are names that you're familiar with. They tend to either be doing something related to the input side of food production, that might be the focus of their business. They might be involved in trading or organizing, distribution, et cetera, of commodities. That might be the core of their business, or they might be selling, sort of buying sort of raw commodities or live animals and turning those, or maybe even owning those animals and then turning them into products. So those sort of, when you think of that bucket of sort of agribusinesses, you're thinking of names that you're very familiar with, names like Bayer Monsanto or Cargill or Archer Daniel Midland or Tyson Foods or Nestle, for example, is an enormous player and an enormous food giant and has hands in all these. Also John Deere, right? Those are very common names that we're familiar with in this agribusiness sector. The thing to remember is that while they sort of do the thing that you think that they do, John Deere makes tractors or whatever, they also play important roles or have their hands in whole other sectors that you don't think that they have a role in. Things like, John Deere is an example of a company that owns a huge amount of farm data and invests hugely in things like, agrochemical application. And so there's a whole range of subsidiary businesses that operate within that. That is true mostly because the food system, not unlike the rest of our economy, but the food system to a huge degree is highly consolidated. There are really only a couple of dozen very large multinational corporations that are controlling the vast majority of activities in the food system. And those folks play in a whole range of arenas, all the way from providing the inputs all the way to selling the products and mixing and mingling all those issues. You've then got the second group I'll talk about, which is is what I call the stewardship level. That's what most people think of as like farmers and ranchers, really independent family farmers and ranchers for the most part, are what we're talking about there. But some of them may be participating with, most of them are interacting with those large agribusiness giants in one way or another, buying products from them, having contracts with them, engaging in their supply chains in one way or another. And more often than not, the agribusiness side of that relationship is dictating to or being predatory towards farmers and ranchers. And so that's sort of the second category. So we hear a lot about how the farmer share of the food dollar is only is a little less than 15 cents of every dollar you spend at the grocery store. The rest of that dollar is going to those agri-food companies, those agribusinesses that sort of are in control of the process. So the farmer, or at the stewardship level, the person managing the land, the animals, et cetera, that's that second bucket. And then in between those folks, you also have what we generally refer to as the big ag lobby, right? Which is organizations. Sometimes those organizations are insurance companies. So you'll be familiar with Farm Bureau, for example, which is not only an insurance company, but also one of the biggest lobbyists in the sort of farm sector, and sort of suggests they represent farmers' interests, although for the most part tend to represent agribusiness interests. And there are others, right? There are commodity groups, the commodity groups that you generally think about, like National Pork Producers Association, National Cattlemen's Association, all of which generally speak for and are at least heavily influenced by these sort of the agribusinesses that control the vast majority of dollars in the supply chain. So thinking about those three buckets of folks, then you really have to think about how they interact. And I think one of the things that Todd and the folks who put the Earth Bill together are attempting to do is to make sure that when we're looking at who's responsible for the emissions related to the food system, we're looking at those agribusinesses that are really dictating the supply chain, the way that things are produced, the way they make their way through the system, all of those things that sort of the agribusiness giants will say is efficient, which really actually just maximizes their bottom line and externalizes things, other costs, not just emissions, but emissions being one of those. And so the key is to make sure that we're linking up those components. The reason I mentioned the commodity groups and those sorts of things is that, and Farm Bureau, is that oftentimes those folks will say they speak for the farmer, but it's important to note that, for example, currently the Securities and Exchange Commission is asking for the integration of agriculture emissions into agribusiness supply chains. And the leading advocate fighting that integration is Farm Bureau, who, by the way, sort of claims they speak for the farmer, but in that case would actually show that the vast majority of those emissions are really attached to the way Tyson, for example, requires that pigs are produced, or the way that a ConAgra requires that the way, or pushes sort of dairy farms to produce milk, or any of those sorts of things. So that's the sort of structure at which you're participating here in the food system. And there's a huge amount of our food system that is sort of encouraged by federal policy, and that comes through things like the Farm Bill and incentives. Oftentimes those incentives are paid sort of directed towards the farmer, but the ultimate, we won't get into the economic analysis of this, but like, for example, when we pay a subsidy on corn or soybeans, what we're actually doing is lowering the feed cost for the Tysons, Cargills, JBSs, Purdue's of the world to produce more and cheaper meat, right? So we have to be really careful, just because we mail a certain person a check, that we understand what our economic implications are of those sorts of activities and how they play out in the realm of sort of building emissions. So I think that, when we can talk about specifics, Todd, related to the bill and that sort of thing, but I think the intent around what you're trying to capture in the Earth Bill is to really identify that there are these big agribusinesses that have huge amounts of power and influence over the way food is produced, and that farmers oftentimes are on a treadmill that's really dictated by those agribusinesses. And so you don't want to be punitive at the ground level, the level of stewardship where the farmer and rancher is, where you want to control the emissions and require that emissions reductions, at least, by the way, the agriculture sector is one of the few sectors that's actually still increasing emissions, not just flatlining, but still increasing emissions. So we have to stop at increasing, and then also start to find our way down in that process of reducing emissions over time. So I hope that, Todd, is a good framing, and then maybe we can take questions or happy to talk more about things that folks are specifically interested in.
Yeah, I think that is great framing, and it seems like we're on the right track with the way we've approached this. I mean, that guidance really did come from experts in this arena. So, I mean, I don't know that I have a great number of questions. So we're targeting the right level of control in the system, and we feel like we have a good definition that captures them. You had one suggestion about that with respect to pesticide folks that we might tweak a little bit later. No problem on that. I'm not giving any edits along to Francesco that could slow down this never-ending filing process, because we're going to have another go at this again, obviously, when we have to refile it again in 6 months from now with the next Congress. So I think this really takes us to where we need to go. I mean, could you talk just a little bit about how uphill a battle we're facing? I mean, the reason that we've included farm with fossil fuel issues is because my initial take on all of this coming into these movements was that neither one of these constituency groups, advocacy arenas, have enough power to take on these huge, oligarchies that essentially control Congress, big ag and big oil. So that maybe by combining these causes and the activists behind them, we might have a better chance, along in terms of building political power from the outside to topple this, and along with, of course, the mounting crisis, which gives urgency and power to change that we've never had before. There's some possibility down this path, but we're going into the Farm Bill of fight again next year. It's the politics in my mind is still the status quo that it's always been. We never win these battles. I mean, Congress is trying to take information in and rally the civil society better, and some of that, but it's going to be the same thing that we just went through on fossil fuels, right? We're going to meet with the same block, and we're going to spend all next year beating our heads against this process without changing what's politically possible, because we haven't changed our strategy and our outside unity and demands. But just give us a little flavor, and then we only have 5 more minutes for this session, and I'm seeing hands pop up all over the place now. So,
yeah. Well, I'll just say quickly that your point is right. The big ag lobby is every bit as forceful as big oil, and quite honestly, because they sort of get away with the idea that they speak for the farmer, and that very few groups outside of those of us sort of active in the sort of counter narrative within the food system really are digesting the idea that, look, they're sort of a different, farmers are not a monolith, but like there really are differences in players and who's participating in the food system. And so I think that you're right. The key is, for those who haven't seen it, there's a great New York Times piece on a video on how agriculture and the big ag lobby is holding up climate change issues, and that's exactly right. There's power that has to be defeated, and it will only come sort of from the outside. All
right, so we're waiting for Felice to be here in a few minutes, so we'll just keep taking questions until she gets here. I don't know who had their hand up. Anne, you want to go first?
Sure. I quickly, I was surprised to hear that emissions are still going up. What accounts for that? And then also, where can we go to get more detailed information about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So emissions from the primary driver from emissions in agriculture generally are so methane from livestock production is, because methane is a highly, a multiplier of carbon. The more we increase the concentration of animals in one place, and the more meat that Americans consume, for example, or people around the world, quite honestly, the more liquid manure that we come up with. There, we can talk a little bit about, like, cows and enteric fermentation. There's sort of there's a ruminant issue there, but really the growth in emission is actually from the way we store highly concentrated animal manure in liquid form. And so that is an enormous place of emissions. There's additional emissions also associated to desire for higher yields around particularly corn crops. So when you think about synthetic fertilizer, you're manufacturing synthetic fertilizer with natural gas. So there's a whole sort of interconnection between sort of fossil fuel and the food system sector. I would encourage looking at the EPA does do a fairly decent job, at least of tracking agricultural emissions, and I'm sure we could get those reports to you.
And Jake, we're going to take another question, but I'm going to insert one from me. I feel like in adding the ag piece, I've learned recently even that, big ag controls the Democrats and the Republicans equally. So I feel like it's going to be a real barrier to getting co-sponsors for our bill. Just the idea that we're saying that we should have the power, the people and the Congress should have the power to determine farming practices to prevent soil degradation and pollution and climate change. But are we going to, I'm finding it interesting, even within the farming activist world, or, you know, where I thought we would have natural allies, people are reluctant to step up here. So any advice on that, or how strong is this hurdle, even from civil society, to get them on board with this idea?
Well, you know, we're sort of, there's also this nature of the fact that people, you know, food prices are increasing, and I think that the reason food prices are increasing has a lot more to do with the margins of big, you know, agribusinesses than it does with actual production cost increases. But we got to remember that those corporations control a really important part of our supply, of our civil society. And, you know, I think it was Kissinger that said, you control the oil, you control the government. If you control the food, you control the people, right? So it's really important to know that this food issue is one where we really have to look for unconventional allies. There are good champions, you know, in Congress for these things on the Democratic side, but there are Democrats that are just as bad, quite honestly, as most Republicans are on particularly issues around food and agriculture, climate change.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry everyone who has their hand up, because it's 12:45 and we have Felice here, and then we have somebody coming in at 1 o'clock. So we're gonna have to cut off this for now, but if you guys have other emails, send them, or questions, send them to me. I'll forward them to Jake. I know you're busy, Jake. Thank you so much for taking this time. Anything you can do to get us we have now, you know, different agriculture and advocacy groups are signing on. There are about 75 groups now, but only a handful of those are really the farm and food and ag folks. So anything you can do to help us get some more names on that board would be wonderful.
I appreciate it. And I look forward to following up on any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jake, for everything. Okay, everybody, I'm sorry to cut you off on questions, but we have Felice joining us, and there was already a question in the chat about this. Welcome back, Felice. Good to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you.
So, well, I won't do an introduction on this. I've had so many emotions around this the last week and a half. I'll let you do sort of the opening about where things stand, and then I'll maybe ask you a few questions about it. But people are eager to know what happened or what is happening with Schumer Manchin and the $550 billion, and what do we do next?
Okay, so yeah, I think everybody has been following probably the stories and the headlines and the disappointment that kind of reverberated across the climate community, and I would also say across many lawmakers, where as you saw, Senator Manchin said, you know, I want to wait to see what the next inflation report shows before I feel comfortable voting on on these investments, the climate and clean energy investments. So a couple things to flag here. I don't want to spend any time really trying to understand kind of what motivated Manchin. There is a lot of different theories out there. There's a lot of ink already sort of devoted to that. And frankly, that's also not where we are. We are, until the door is completely bolted shut and until the Senate casts a vote, we are going to continue to look for where there's opportunities to get even some of the priorities that were in the $550 billion package inserted. And I say that because, for one, you know, we're going to continue to, we're going to have to continue to work with Manchin, and I would also say until a vote is cast, we actually also have no guarantee where some of the other senators are. So it doesn't really serve us well to try to either villainize one particular senator or to spend a lot of time trying to understand what has motivated all of the machinations that he's put us through. So where does that stand? So right now, the way it looks is that leadership, so Senator Schumer is, you know, he's got a tremendous amount of, like, not only power in terms of the process, but also I would say tremendous responsibility. And so the way it's going to look is he's going to be working on getting all of his ducks in a row, or the leadership is going to get all the ducks in a row to move a budget bill forward. And it's could likely go to the floor next week, maybe next Wednesday or Thursday, because they want to try to get this all done before they go on their August recess, which is after the first week of August. So, and that's a very sacred recess. Senators don't like ever staying in town one day later. So the idea is that he would put it forward, or they would put it forward, a package that they know gets 50 votes, which is the Affordable Care Act and the prescription drug components that were in the original House passed version. So I will say incredibly important pieces. I am not going to suggest that those are not important. They are an incredibly important pieces of the package, and I'm glad to see that those are moving. With that said, there is going to be an opportunity for lawmakers to offer amendments that could, if they pass muster, so if they meet certain, budgetary guidelines, and if they can fit and they're germane to the bill, which they will be, that there could be amendments offered to this budget package. And some may be offered by the Republicans, some may be offered by the Democrats. Some are messaging amendments to just try to get members on the record for where they stand on some things. Some are intended to actually try to get 50 votes, which is where you come in, where I hope you can come in. So we are working to identify, are there pieces of within that bigger $550 billion package? For example, the clean energy tax incentives, the incentives to help really kind of propel clean energy manufacturing and deployment in this country, which has a tremendous amount of support within corporate America, within, voters on the Hill, across the country. So let's take that one as an example. And by the way, we are not in control of any of this process. So we're just sort of like, we're throwing everything at the wall and until the door is bolted shut. So that could be an amendment that could be offered to the budget bill that goes to the floor. And so are there discrete pieces that could potentially get 50 votes? That would be a great place to be. So so that's what we're hoping for. We are in a no regrets posture right now. We want to continue to figure out where there are opportunities to get any of the priorities that were in that $550 billion package that can get 50 votes included into that bill before the Senate votes on it, and before that door is bolted shut. So the clean energy investments could be one, and I'm just going to focus on that one because I think that's just in terms of kind of what where we could use your help. So our strategy then right now is, in order for it to move smoothly, we want to make sure that leadership and Senator Schumer does all of the dots the I's, crosses the T's on that amendment. And for in Washington, D.C., what has to happen, it has to go to a person called the parliamentarian, and the parliamentarian has to look at each piece, each amendment, to make sure it fits all of the budget parameters, so it could actually be a legitimate amendment. And our ask to Senator Schumer is, please make sure that the priorities, like the clean energy investments, that you continue to do everything you can to make sure it can be considered as part of the budget bill when it moves to the floor, to the Senate floor. So if you feel comfortable and using the word, make sure you take it to the parliamentarian so it's ready. Or if you want to just keep it really sort of more generic of, please continue to make sure you're doing everything you can to take, you know, the clean energy investments or any other piece that could garner 50 votes and have it ready for when the budget bill goes to the floor. Getting personal phone calls into his office right now through this week, it would be really just tremendously helpful, tremendously helpful. We're not trying to shame Senator Schumer. That doesn't work, right? Like, he's not the problem, but he also has a lot of power and has, you know, we want him to know, like, we're not gonna go away quietly and be like, oh, I guess, you know, you're not gonna work on this right now. We're gonna just do ACA and prescription drugs, which again, super, super important. We're not gonna jeopardize that vote because we know we need to get that vote over the finish line. But have him understand that he does have the ability to do all of that groundwork. This is groundwork. Get it through the parliamentarian, make sure that the discrete pieces, those amendments can be basically, I hate to use this term, but it's really locked and loaded, ready to go for when the budget bill moves to the floor next week. So that's my ask.
All right, well, wonderful.
My request, I should say, not my ask, my request.
That's all right. We're not formal around here. Well, thank you. Okay, so all right, so we know that there's continual push happening. That's good. I think it would be helpful if the climate action campaign messaging on next Monday's call was along these lines, as opposed to accepting the conclusion that we've been handed after almost, you know, a year and some months of pushing for this. It was a very abrupt switch of the strategy. So I think the other thing that would be helpful is if we knew who was going to do the amendment proposal, so we can start getting.
I would not, I honestly, I'll just share with you, it is so fluid. And I would not even get into, so first of all, don't worry about CAC. So my feeling is right now, every group is trying to figure out what makes the most sense for their group, and CAC is a coalition. So my request is, you know, there's only so much time. We don't know who's going to offer the amendment. We know that the clean energy and tax incentives piece that Senator Wyden has worked really hard on has tremendous support. But it's actually, for right now, Todd, it's not, those are bits of information that would be nice to know, but as of today, not essential, because Senator Schumer is the one who has to send the pieces to the parliamentarian to do the work.
All right, understood.
Yeah, so yeah,
that's,
I don't mean to like sort of be like so draconian about it, but it's just, I mean, I think that's where we are. And you're asking for 2 sentences, and I am going to give you a draft. So what's the best way to get it to you? Just put something in the chat or send it to you after?
you can send to me email, and I'm going to send out an email blast about this next push.
Okay, but I will, okay.
And it's very simple. I mean, when you just call Schumer's office, just say, you know, well, police can write something while we're talking about, you want them to vote on climate. You want to bring climate provisions to a vote in the reconciliation process. So basically, if you just call them and say, you know, keep pushing on climate, you know, don't give up on climate, don't give up on the earth, they'll get the message. Well,
I put something here. Do everything possible right now to make sure the clean energy investments that have broad support, you can shorten it. You don't have to have all the other stuff, because this is going to be a letter, but you could take the first part, urge you to do everything possible right now to make sure the clean energy investments remain a part of the budget bill preparations that are underway. We are at a pivotal moment, and we urge the Senate leadership to not let this opportunity slip. We're counting on you, Senator Schumer. We are counting on you. Yeah, we are counting on your leadership here.
All right. And I feel like we shouldn't spend a lot of time pontificating about nexus, but we really had until September 30th. And why are we accepting the idea of an August recess when the planet is on fire? How is it that we're, when congressional staff are doing a sit-in his office, risking their careers and their, and then we're about to shut down the baseball game, and there's energy out there to keep fighting. So why are we letting them walk away?
Well, I would say it two ways. One is, there's just certain things, like the Senate is just very protective of those weeks because they want to go home and they want to campaign because we have very few days for them to campaign. August is the season for campaigning. So it's just been like, do I like that? No. Could they wait a few more days? Yes. But I'll be honest, like there's also some skepticism among some senators that waiting for a few days does not necessarily mean that Senator Manchin is going to change his mind. So, so I would say that's one thing. You're right. September 30th is the true deadline. And there's some question of whether there may be a second budget reconciliation bill, a second budget bill, a more narrow one that could move. They could do that. But right now, what we want to do is we want to see what is at all humanly possible between now and the August recess, and then we'll pick up the pieces.
Okay.
I gotta go, guys. Great to see you.
Thank you, please. And I never want to put you on the spot because I know you're not doing, you're doing everything.
Hey, believe me, I agree with you. I would also say there's like, where's the people power? But I don't want to go there with you yet. Okay,
No,
we'll talk soon.
I understand. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks for everything and for always being here.
Thanks to all of you. Really appreciate and always love seeing you guys. Bye. Bye.
Same here. All right. Bye-bye. All right. I almost clicked leave because I was like, okay, that's next time. What do I do next? All right, folks. Well, let me end the poll and see if I can share it. Share results. I forgot to do that last time. So you can see that everybody thinks we should, well, 26, only 27 people voted. So, but keep pushing Senate. The same people support the declaration of a climate emergency. The EPA is a little more of a mixed bag, and we're about to hear more about that. And then unfortunately, the Earth bill seems to be a little bit more of a mixed bag too. So, well, that's great. I don't mind having I'm feeling the same way about this point. I'm waiting for the bill to be introduced myself. So I can't push back too much on that, but I am a little surprised since this is our audience and you guys are our regular crew that there's any hesitation whatsoever. But no worries about that. We're on a long journey here. I'll leave that over there and people can see or move it to where you want. Next up, I'm very happy to welcome Dan Galpern, who is the General Counsel and Executive Director of a group called Climate Protection and Restoration Initiative. And they are organizing the petition to the EPA along with James Hansen and our friend Lisa Van Susteren to get the EPA to use another path to ban greenhouse gas pollution. Welcome, Dan, and thank you so much for doing this. We're desperate and for new ideas. So I was very excited to see this come across, and we're eager to hear how this will work, what our likelihood of success is, and all the great information you have to share with us. And we're also happy to have you contextualize it to the extent you would like within the other rulemaking EPA initiatives, and tell us generally what kind of hope we have at the EPA.
Very good. Good to join you. And actually, Todd, let me make one little point with respect to the last presentation, because in her potential message that she quickly devised for you, she left out the part where she was wanting people to be quite specific about what they want Schumer to do. And in fact, initially she said, urge Schumer to make sure that the parliamentarian has done its work. As a former legislative staffer, albeit at the California legislature, I would just urge you to, add the words "are fully on the table, ready to go," and remain a part of the budget proposal budget bill preparations. That level of specificity sometimes can break through the, break through with a staffer and show that the caller knows what they're talking about. In any event, so just a little background. I've been working as the legal and policy advisor to the climate scientist James Hansen for the last 14 or 15 years. And a couple of years ago, I decided to found this new organization. Jim Hansen's on our board of advisors, called Climate Protection and Restoration Initiative, in part in order to attempt to break through the deadlock over climate policy, including with respect to the recurrent stalemate in Congress. And this proposal, which I think you, did you circulate this already to people? Okay. Is our first truly major lift. And so I'm delighted to be here. We seek people's assistance in getting this across the finish line. So, and the question is, what can be done in the wake of the West Virginia versus EPA decision, in the context of the continuing war in the Ukraine and the determination by the Biden administration to help Europe backfill some of the supplies that are lost from Russian oil and gas distribution, and in the context of the continuing stalemate in Congress. Is it true that the best that can be hoped for is that the executive branch will be able to exercise quite marginal executive authority to and not really get anything even coming close to the commitment that we made in our nationally determined contribution to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change? Is there any hope that our actions can meet our words internationally? Is there any hope of doing something serious? And the answer is that yes, there is some hope. And we have attempted to outline that in some detail in our petition to the Environmental Protection Agency, which we filed on June 16. That filing, by the way, kicks off a 90-day statutory deadline. And so the threshold decision by EPA needs to be made by September 14. And for that purpose, we've launched this little campaign, and we are seeking everyone to endorse the petition and file the and support the campaign, sponsor the campaign. And that's all at our website at cprclimate.org. In brief, the petition is a citizen's petition under Section 21 of the Toxic Substances Control Act, asks EPA to make the threshold determination whether or not greenhouse gas pollution and its major sources presents, and I'm using the language directly out of Section 6 of the statute, presents an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment. And we think really there's only one rational answer to that, particularly here, where there are known alternatives to continuing high utilization of fossil fuels and increasing alternatives to the allowing emissions, legacy emissions, to remain in the atmosphere and continue to poison the ocean. Where there are such alternatives, then the risk presented by these chemical substances and mixtures, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and the other Kyoto 6 greenhouse gases, present what the president, both as candidate and as president, has repeatedly said amounts to an existential threat. Well, where you have an existential threat, that's optional. We think that meets the definition, any reasonable definition of unreasonable. Once EPA makes that threshold determination, that kicks off a rulemaking process. That process could last a number of months, perhaps 18 months, but we think need not last much longer than that. where under Section 6 again of the Act, the agency is required, not merely authorized, but required, if necessary, to impose one or more of 7 specified requirements specified by Congress in Section 6 of the Toxic Substance Control Act. And they include restrictions to the point of prohibition on the chemical substances and mixtures, here the greenhouse gases, that are presenting the unreasonable risk, as well as restrictions and regulation of the method of disposal of the substances that are causing the problem. Well, how do we dispose of greenhouse gases to date? We just freely let it into the air as if the atmosphere is a free and open sewer. And because of the long-lived nature, especially of CO2, which a substantial portion remains in the environment for millennia before it's finally, through weathering, reincorporated into Earth's system. What you have here is essentially a continuing disposal problem. And so we think, based on my analysis and others, that there is no other statute available for the purpose to get after this significant portion of the problem. So there are 2 substantial components of the climate crisis. One is the continuing emissions problem, and the other is the legacy emissions. And this petition demands action by the agency under this strong law to get after both. So in any event, that's my opening, and that was a lot of stuff that I just said, and I'd be happy to take any questions or however you like to proceed with this conversation, Todd.
Well, it's up to you. I don't mind if you want to dig in a little bit more. When I first put this out there and started asking, or sharing information about it, some people shared some decisions where carbon dioxide, was trying to be categorized under this Substance Control Act, toxic substance, with respect to ocean acidification, and that was shot down. So can you explain to us a little bit more about how we're going to get into the initial threshold determination, and specifically how this qualifies whatever the specific test is for the EPA?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. First of all, with respect to the 2015 petition that was shot down, 2 things. First of all, that petitioner is the chair of our board of directors. This is a very different petition, and the statute is very different because of the bipartisan amendments, the Lautenberg amendments of 2016, substantially strengthens the law from our perspective for purposes of the petition. And secondly, that petition was geared specifically to the ocean acidification problem, which is still a substantial problem, and we address that in the 75 pages of our petition that are that review the relevant science. But this petition is also describing the climate crisis problem more broadly, and things have gotten a lot worse since then. So in any event, and one of the reasons why EPA rejected that petition, and by the way, that was never litigated in court, that rejection, was that the agency said that we're already handling the ocean acidification problem through other programs. Of course, whether or not that they thought they were doing that, then the ocean acidification problem is getting worse and worse, and EPA certainly has admitted to that in many of the documents to which the United States is a party and that the EPA itself has published. So there's no I think that there's very little question about the relevant science. There's questions about some of the details of the relevant science, but with respect to establishing that this is an unreasonable risk, I think that this petition I think that the case that we've made is overwhelming. So the question then is, I think, really, why this approach? And is it true that CO2 is as you indicated before, is really a toxic substance? And so going to your question, in Section 6 of the Act, the test is merely this. Does the chemical substance or mixture, here the greenhouse gases, do they or do they not present an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment? So there's no requirement that the substance directly induce cancer or heart disease or organ failure of any sense. Action is permissible and in fact required where the injury is mediated by the environment. And there's a direct agency precedent for that. Excuse me, and that is that in 1978, we commenced restrictions and phase out of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, under TSCA. And on the ground, directly in the rule issued by EPA, that CFCs are injuring the ozone layer and they are a potent greenhouse gas. So there's a significant precedent for its use against one of the major greenhouse gases, and there's no reason why it can't be utilized for the others. The question is it necessary? And we think that it certainly is, because other statutes and other provisions of statutes have not proven themselves to be sufficient for the United States to be controlling our contribution to the problem sufficiently.
All right, well, so we're on this quest. I'm just excited to see another avenue. We've got the link, everybody in the chat. I have a general question, then we'll go to a couple questions from our team here. The statutes that the EPA is trying to use to address this through a variety of rulemakings, they've been enforced for decades, and nobody's stopped this greenhouse gas pollution with those statutes all these years. And now there's this big push to get them to do something under existing. I mean, is there anything new that's gonna, if it weren't for your petition, is there anything that's you see changing in the, in the output of the EPA? I mean, and why is it taken 18, however many months into this administration, and there's not been any new strong rules issued? I know they're always waiting for something. They're waiting for reconciliation. They're waiting for the Supreme Court. So
well, I would not go that far. EPA has been busy on a number of rulemakings. They're working on new limitations under, Section 202 of the Clean Air Act to limit emissions from cars and light trucks, light duty vehicles. They're trying to figure out whether there's enough room after the West Virginia case to issue perhaps not as a comprehensive, but still perhaps an important limitation with respect to emissions from existing power plants. We think that there's significant room also under the Clean Air Act to impose a national ambient air quality standard, which we don't have with respect to CO2. And in the petition, by the way, one of the beauties about TSCA is that it directs, under the agency's discretion, the agency to utilize other authorities to address the same problem to the extent that they're adequate to control a problem, or in its judgment of the public interest to also utilize the Toxic Substances Control Act. And in our petition, we're not saying, it's TSCA and nothing else. We're saying it's these other authorities plus TSCA, because no other authority allows the agency to get after legacy emissions. And most of the other authorities, Todd, compel merely, best available control, and these have been interpreted by the administration, by the courts, to not permit, a full phase out. But here, with respect to the climate crisis, we've so so overshot the safe level of atmospheric CO2 and some of the other greenhouse gases like methane, that we need essentially to phase out these emissions and also to remove legacy emissions. So, you know, we think that this is an important subject for restrictions under TSCA, but that does not mean that we think that the EPA should abandon its efforts under other authorities. To the contrary.
Okay, wonderful. So we have a couple questions. They're getting at what I'm wondering about too, is like, what's our next move? So we're going to sign these petitions and all that. What additional pressure, and then we'll go to Bill and then Rachel. I mean, what kind of additional pressure, outside pressure, would the EPA be responsive to? I keep thinking that we should be holding rallies outside their regional headquarters and bringing public pressure to bear with direct action, nonviolent, of course, outside. Is there anything like that you think they'd be receptive to, or at least that would help, whether they're receptive or not?
Some of those questions I don't want to really speak to on a webinar, but we're asking people to help us in 3 ways. Number one, endorse the, and by the way, many of you are from organizations, so what I'm saying has to do with an action that you can take individually and an action that you can, actions that you can take organizationally. People individually, you know, using the positions or titles that you have, identifying those, should, we think, we hope, endorse. And then secondly, and the organizations can endorse. Secondly, you can sponsor by providing a financial contribution individually and organizationally. We're up against a Goliath, and we're greatly underfunded, and any amount that people can provide will be exceptionally helpful. And feel free to talk to me directly if you have if you want to discuss. And third, we're in the public comment period. Please comment. We have a portal right on our website, and people can comment through that. But if you're seeking to do a substantial comment where you're going to be attaching documents, PDFs, and that sort of thing, well, we also provide the way that you can go directly to the relevant docket portal of EPA. So those 3 things, minimally, we're hoping everyone will engage in, endorse, sponsor, and comment. Protests, if they're well organized and well conducted, and I'll just talk about this generally, can be very helpful too.
All right, well, I understand, and thank you for that. Okay, Bill.
My question relates to exactly that, and it is specifically, who are the individuals at EPA who make this decision?
Well, first of all, that is a good question, and that question also presumes that it will be the individuals at EPA alone that will make this decision, and we don't think that. A decision of this magnitude probably will at least be influenced by the White House. So anyhow, the ultimate decision here at EPA is for Administrator Michael Regan, and the Office of Toxic Substances and Pollution Prevention is the office within the agency that will be carrying this out. By the way, I should say, we didn't just write this and quickly file it. We had a significant period of consultation with the agency, and we have met with that office that I just talked about, the Office of Toxic Substances and Pollution Prevention, and we also met with the Office of Air and Radiation. We've also met with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and we are also in communication with President Biden's domestic climate change advisor, Gina McCarthy. And so, I can't say exactly, who will have the control, except that the ultimate decision will be by Michael Regan. Now, let me just say this, though, because I need to emphasize this. In this petition, and you go to our website, you can read it. It's 127 pages, but we do in that outline what we think a rulemaking would look like. But that's the agency's acceptance of this petition does not mean that they have to do exactly what we outline in the petition. All they need to do at this threshold determination stage is answer the question whether, two questions: is this petition necessary? And we think it's overwhelmingly clear that they seek additional authority to get the job done. And then, is it true that these chemical substances and mixtures present an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment? And upon their determination, yes, to those questions, then they are to open up a rulemaking process. And that rulemaking process, as I indicated before, that needs to involve public participation. They have the time; they can take the time to consider a full-blown decarbonization program in the United States at long last. And by the way, it can also include provisions for border tariffs to ensure a level playing field for United States manufacturing and industry, and that way, given our purchasing power of this country, this can become something of a global effort. But that only need to make this threshold determination at this stage. Do they present an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment, or not?
We want to win this one. It sounds like we're in the strike zone. Rachel, go ahead.
I'm glad that we're being exposed to this. I will do the research. What is the problem that the Supreme Court didn't recognize a hefty bill from Congress? And are you trying to say there is a hefty bill, here it is, and EPA will agree? Because it looks like the Supreme Court is not our friend. So I'm thinking, if I kind of got the strategy right, what would prevent the Supreme Court to kind of not understand? They are not good folks. And, there are a lot of people who say that they're environmental lawyers and they don't care. If you got where you want with what you're proposing that we help you with, how do we prevent the Supreme Court from knocking the whole tent down? Okay,
great question, Rachel. Thank you for that. First of all, some environmental lawyers care, like me, but in any event,
of course.
And I don't know that I don't think any of the Supreme Court justices are environmental lawyers, but let's put that to the side. The one question in among many that they're implicit in your comment is, can anything prevent the Supreme Court from doing anything? And as you saw in the Dodds decision, even long-standing precedent, grounded, at least in my opinion, in at least an unenumerated right in the Constitution, can be overturned if there is sufficient will of the present majority of the Supreme Court. And with respect to this, I cannot tell you for sure that that a rule that would be developed, even with widespread public support and participation, would not at some point be overturned by the Supreme Court. It's possible. But if they did that, then we have even more reason to go back to Congress and demand action. The Supreme Court is not the Supreme Court is the last word with respect to the legality and interpretation of present statutes. It's not the last word with respect to policy in the United States. All that said, I think that there is, if you actually read the West Virginia decision, the majority's opinion, they were interpreting one specific provision, namely Section 111D of the Clean Air of one statute, the Clean Air Act, and found specifically that that provision of law did not convey sufficient authority to EPA to have restricted in the way they did emissions from existing power plants. This is under a different statute, and that statute is both is more pointed with respect to the agency's powers. As I said before, it conveys upon this threshold determination the authority to restrict to the point of prohibition of the certain chemicals, substances, or mixtures, and it has been used in that way, and it has been used in that way with respect to powerful greenhouse gases, namely CFCs. So this is not. We think that this should survive so-called major questions doctrine scrutiny, because this is not an entirely novel interpretation. I mean, we think that we have been intelligent in this, but we're not suddenly finding authority here. In fact, there's a 44-year pedigree for this agency's use in this way of this statute. One other point I wanted to make in response. I won't go into the background, but in 2017, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, the second most important court in the country, decided a case over HFCs, whether the agency had sufficient authority to compel manufacturers of air conditioners or aerosols and that sort of thing to replace the HFCs that they had put in those units with more benign substances, because HFCs are a powerful greenhouse gas. And the court said that the particular section of the Clean Air Act, section 612, that the agency had relied on there for authority for doing that, and for compelling replacement of HFCs with less harmful substances, that authority was not really conveyed by that section of the Clean Air Act. But the court said they could use TSCA for the purpose. And now, Rachel, wait a second, Rachel, let me tell you, who was the author of the majority opinion of the DC Circuit Court opinion? Justice Brett Kavanaugh, now in the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, we think we have a very good argument if we have to go to court over this. We will fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. We think that we would win, but if we lost, in the courts, not all is lost, because we would be able then to show a very strong rule has been created, including with widespread public participation, to get us from horror to safety, and then we would need at that point to go to Congress. And then lastly, let me just say one other thing. We're banging our heads against the wall of a recalcitrant, hopelessly deadlocked Congress, year after year after year, trying to get Congress to speak to the question. Well, Congress already did in the Clean Air Act, as passed in 1976 and as amended in 2016. And so what we are trying to do here is something quite a bit different, to get the agency to fully enforce the law.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, as I said in opening this session, it was very exciting to hear of a new avenue because it seemed like we were, running out of them. And so this is a great push. We're very grateful to have you, Dan, and for James Hansen and all his work and your team. Please let us keep us posted. What's the deadline again for these comments or for the?
The deadline is September 14. We will be soon publishing on our website our high-level endorsers and all of our sponsors, and conveying that all to the administration, so that the administration can appreciate that this has wide public support, and then so public comments can be conveyed right now and all the way up to the end.
All right. Wonderful. Again, well, thank you for doing all of this and for coming and joining and briefing us. We're very grateful, and we'll stay in touch, and we're going to do our share to keep banging the drum and rallying folks to action. I keep trying to get folks interested in EPA organizing outside their offices, but I'm not getting any traction on that. So we'll just go the regular route for now, and we'll put our efforts behind yours, and hopefully this will produce some really great results.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate your invitation today. Thank you all.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, everyone. Well, what a day we've had. Hope and disappointment, hope and disappointment, hope and disappointment. So we're going to conclude in just a second. I'm just going to some closing remarks. So we're pushing to get the Earth bill filed. Please go ahead, even if you're a little hesitant, to share the Dear Colleague letter with any congressional staff you have, just to start getting it on their radar, because you know how long everything takes, reviews, etc. So please go ahead with that work. And everything you need is on our website. If you get confused, or don't hesitate to email me. If you're actively contacting people, keep me posted. It always helps lift my spirits to see what work you have going on. We're going to continue phone banking Schumer through at least the next week. The emphasis will be there. It's very simple to do it. In the email I just sent out reminding people of today's call, there's the phone number in there. The message is very straightforward. Keep working on climate, get something done on climate. And then the specific messages about working the parliamentarian process, we'll convey those through our contact. And now we have the big EPA push. It's not just this one. There are several rulemakings going on, and there's a whole new coalition for that. And I encourage you to join that coalition if you're a group that works on these kinds of rules, or know groups that do or that care about this. Please have them join that. That's with the Climate Action Campaign. So there are a variety of fronts. As you know, I'm not pontificating really on the merits of any of these rulemakings, or even a lot of it, even the climate emergency push. Oh, don't forget that. That's going really well with People versus Fossil Fuels, which has constituted itself and has great working groups and structure and great attendance. They had, they say, 1,000 people on a call about actions for August 7th. That was a little quick for me. I'm not going to be doing, I don't think, anything right now, but the main idea is that they have this new initiative that when there are weather emergencies or extreme weather events, that they were trying to get people to mobilize. So this is the first one they've decided, because of the heat wave, it's happening now. And so they're rushing ahead a little bit, which is great. We have to rush and push harder and get things done. So there's a panoply of things in motion. We'll keep at this. And once our bill gets introduced, we'll probably start having additional meetings specifically on the Earth bill, maybe back at our Monday night slate that we used to. But I'm waiting for that bill to happen. Until we do that, let's see. I guess that's everything for our official meeting. Thank you all for joining us. And we're going to stay on the line afterwards and just talk informally about how everyone's feeling about everything. Thank you again for all your sustained efforts and constant enthusiasm, and for always showing up. It's great and appreciated. And this is a long battle. This is a long battle. CO2 emissions are still going up. Everything's still going the wrong direction, except I would say the organizing of within the movement, which is going in many directions, but solidifying, and the institutional components of it are being built. And so the capacity to fight is growing. The organizations around it are unifying. And so we still have a long way to go, obviously, but there's movement in the right direction. So we have to look at those good things and be grateful for that and keep fighting and just keep fighting. Thank you all for everything, and we'll conclude the official session, and then we'll just go into open gallery forum, and anyone who has questions, I'm happy to sit around and talk about it. Thank you all.